The airlock hissed like an angry cat, spitting Vesper and Dr. Arcana into the gut of the Wormhole station with all the grace of a drunken sailor. The former, grumbling under her breath about goddamn squeaky doors, and the latter, adjusting his spectacles with the resigned air of a man who considered the universe a personal disappointment. "You know, it's a wonder this place hasn't fallen apart yet," Vesper muttered, kicking a loose bolt across the floor. "With all the budget cuts, we're about 3 credit chips away from duct taping the whole damn station together." Dr. Arcana, forever the optimist, shrugged as if to say, "What can you do?" His actual words were, "Could be worse. Could be pirates." "Oh, you mean like last month, when they tried to ransom us for a week's supply of oxygen?" Vesper snorted. "I still say we should have let them suffocate. Natural selection at its finest." The corridor stretched ahead, illuminated by the sickly glow of flickering lights that seemed to be powered by sheer willpower and a little bit of hope. The two made their way past doors marked with the routine drudgery of station life: maintenance, recycling, coffee if you're lucky. Today's mission was different, though. Rumors had slithered through the station about a hidden chamber, a whisper of something strange beneath the mundane. And if there was one thing Vesper loved more than hating her job, it was poking around where she wasn't supposed to. "You sure this is the right way?" Arcana asked, eyeing a sign that read, "Danger, toxic waste." "Well, unless they started labeling the cafeteria as hazardous, I'd say yes," Vesper replied, smirking. "But then again, Bob's cooking could kill a man." They reached a hatch that looked suspiciously like it had been designed by someone with a severe grudge against user-friendly interfaces. Vesper crouched down, pulling out a toolkit that was more rust than tool, and began to tinker. "Shouldn't we wait for security clearance or something?" Arcana asked, though his tone suggested he already knew the answer. "Why, Dr. Arcana, I didn't know you were such a stickler for the rules," she replied, sarcasm dripping from her words like honey from a bear's paw. "Besides, it's not like they'd give clearance to 2 people who aren't even supposed to know this place exists." With a satisfying click, the hatch swung open, revealing a staircase spiraling down into darkness. It was inviting in the way a black hole invites space debris, inevitable and final. "Ladies first," Arcana gestured gallantly, though his eyes betrayed the eagerness of a man who'd rather face unknown horrors than another day of station bureaucracy. "Age before beauty," Vesper shot back, stepping into the abyss with the kind of reckless confidence usually reserved for lottery winners and people who've never met a hangover they couldn't ignore. The descent was steep and narrow, lit only by the occasional emergency light that cast more shadows than illumination. The air was thick with dust, the kind that seemed to cling to your lungs like a needy ex. "Tell me again why we're doing this," Arcana wheezed. "I thought your idea of a thrill was finding an extra dessert in the mess hall. Curiosity, my dear doctor." "And maybe a little bit of spite," Vesper replied, her voice echoing off the walls. "Besides, aren't you tired of just surviving? Don't you want to know if there's something more out there, other than filing reports and dodging alien tax collectors?" "True, I suppose finding a secret chamber beats going over refugee census data," Arcana admitted. "Though, with our luck, we'll just find a whole room full of moldy potatoes." "A girl can dream," Vesper chuckled, stepping off the last stair with a flourish, only to be greeted by a door that looked like it had been designed during an era when subtlety meant adding more spikes. It was here, looming like a bad decision at a good party, that they paused. Vesper ran her hands over the surface, feeling for a catch or a clue or, preferably, a big red button that said, "Press here for secrets." "You think maybe we should have brought a gun?" Arcana asked, more as an afterthought than a genuine question. "Nah," Vesper waved him off. "What's the worst that can happen?" We opened the door, and it's just another storeroom full of station supplies. With a final twist of ingenuity, or maybe just sheer dumb luck, the door creaked open, revealing the room beyond. It was not a storeroom. Rows upon rows of pods lined the walls, glowing softly with an eerie luminescence that looked like it belonged in a sci-fi horror movie. Each pod was occupied, the figures inside suspended in some form of artificial sleep, and each face unmistakably, disturbingly, was human. "Son of a," Vesper trailed off, eyes wide as she took in the sight. "What the hell have we stumbled into, Doctor?" Arcana, for once, was speechless. Which was probably a good thing, because anything he might have said would have likely been drowned out by the alarm bells ringing in their heads. Vesper moved closer to one of the pods, wiping the condensation from its surface with her sleeve. The figure inside was a woman, her features serene, as if dreaming of better times, or maybe just hoping they didn't end up as station jerky. "Cloning," Arcana finally breathed, his voice tinged with a mix of awe and horror. "Of all the things, why cloning? Maybe they're just big fans of themselves," Vesper quipped, though her heart wasn't in it. The implications hung in the air like a noose. "We need to figure out who's behind this," Arcana said, his tone turning serious. "This kind of tech, it's dangerous in the wrong hands." "Dangerous in the right ones too," Vesper replied, stepping back, feeling the weight of the discovery settle into her bones. "I've got a bad feeling about this. We should get out of here," Arcana urged, glancing back at the door like it was the last lifeboat on a sinking ship. Vesper nodded, reluctantly tearing her gaze away from the human replicas. She couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched, even though the room was silent save for the hum of machinery. They retraced their steps, the gravity of their discovery pressing down on them like an overeager sumo wrestler. A million questions buzzed in Vesper's mind, each more troubling than the last. "You think anyone else knows about this?" Arcana asked as they climbed the stairs, his voice a low whisper as if afraid to wake the sleeping clones. "If they did, we'd probably have company by now," Vesper replied, not entirely comforted by her own logic. They emerged back into the corridor, blinking against the harsh artificial lighting that suddenly seemed too bright, too normal for what they'd just uncovered. "We're going to have to be careful," Arcana said, the understatement of the century. "Careful's my middle name," Vesper grinned, though it was more bravado than truth. "Now, let's go see what kind of trouble we can stir up." They headed back towards the hub of the station, unwelcome passengers in a world that suddenly seemed much more complicated. With each step, Vesper felt the thrill of the unknown mingling with a primal fear, a potent cocktail that promised more danger than any bar alcohol. "You realize this could end badly, right?" Arcana commented, not for the first time. "Oh, I don't doubt it," Vesper replied, a wicked glint in her eye. "But at least it'll be interesting." "Doctor," Arcana snorted, "interesting. You've got a twisted definition of fun, Vesper." "If I didn't, I'd probably still be working in accounts," she shot back, shaking her head at some past version of herself who cared more about pensions than pod people. "So what's the plan?" Arcana asked, as they stepped into the central terminal, a hive of activity where oblivious faces went about their lives, unaware of the secret slumbering beneath them. "Find out who's running this sideshow," Vesper said, eyes scanning the crowd, looking for anyone who looked like they knew more than they admitted. "And maybe, just maybe, we can shut it down." Arcana nodded, and together they walked into the unknown, a pair of rebels with a cause, though what that cause exactly was, neither of them could quite say. Yet. In the end, they were just two small players in a game that spanned stars and systems, but for now, they were ready to throw a few wrenches into the works and see what happened. After all, what's life without a little mayhem? And as they disappeared into the crowd, a shadow shifted in the darkened corner of the station, watching with eyes that gleamed maliciously. The game, it seemed, was already afoot. The Wormhole station buzzed with an uneasy energy, like a hornet's nest caught in a blender of bad decisions. News of the cloning pods had spread faster than an alien tax auditor through disorganized paperwork. The diverse population, a charming blend of refugees, interstellar tourists, and those simply trying to avoid alimony on their home planets, was in an uproar. Vesper and Dr. Arcana navigated through the crowd, their faces set in the universal expression of "not my problem." They had bigger fish to fry, or possibly clones to grill. "Did you hear?" whispered a Phylaxian with more limbs than sense, sidling up to a group of equally startled companions. "Human cloning experiments right under our noses. Why am I not surprised?" grumbled a Grundle, its voice a low rumble that matched its perpetually disgruntled expression. "Humans can't even recycle properly without a manual. Now they're playing God." "Hey," Vesper barked, stepping into the conversation like a referee at a particularly aggressive soccer match. "This isn't some kind of human conspiracy, all right. We're just as baffled as you are." "Baffled?" snorted the Grundle. "That's a word humans use when they've lost the instruction manual, isn't it?" "Touché," Vesper admitted, unwillingly impressed by the alien's snark. "Look, we're trying to get to the bottom of this. Whatever those things are, they're not yours, Doctor." Arcana, ever the diplomat even when diplomacy was the last thing the situation called for, adjusted his spectacles with a resigned air. "If it was a human project, we'd have branded it and started selling merchandise by now." A few chuckles broke through the tension like distant gunfire on a peaceful day, and Vesper seized the moment. "We're in this mess together, folks. So maybe let's keep the pitchforks in storage for now." Somewhere in the back of the crowd, a Ralnoxian with particularly twitchy tentacles muttered something suspiciously like, "It's always the humans." But the group eventually dispersed, muttering to themselves about the madness of it all. "Well, that went better than expected," Arcana said, as they continued towards the command center. "At least no one tried to drown us in a vat of station coffee." "Small victories," Vesper replied, her eyes scanning for any signs of hostility or, worse, bureaucracy. "But something tells me this is just the beginning." They arrived at the command center, a place that looked like it had been designed by someone with a fetish for blinking lights and uncomfortable plastic chairs. Commander Thrix, a towering insectoid with a face that only a mother could love, and even then probably with reservations, was waiting for them. "Ah, the humans," Thrix buzzed, his wings flicking with an irritation so palpable it could have peeled paint. "I assume you're here because of the incident." "Incident?" Vesper echoed. "It's not every day you find a room full of yourself while you're taking a casual stroll." Thrix's mandibles clicked ominously. "This is a matter of grave concern. The station is a sanctuary, not a laboratory for reckless human endeavors." "Whoa, hold your horses, or your antennae," Vesper interrupted. "This isn't our doing. We're just as clueless as everyone else. Besides, if humans were running a cloning operation, the station would be filled with more than humans. Probably dogs and coffee machines." Arcana nodded sagely. "And maybe a few more competent officials." "You joke," Thrix growled, "but this technology poses a significant threat. If the galaxy learns that humans are cloning themselves, it could incite panic." "And we all know how the galaxy loves a good panic," Vesper said dryly. "Look, Commander, we're on your side here. We want to find out who's behind this as much as you do." Thrix eyed them, his compound eyes reflecting 1,000 suspicions. "Very well. But know this, if I find any evidence of human involvement, the consequences will be severe, for all of us." "Understood," Arcana replied, his voice as soothing as a lullaby sung by a psychopath. "We'll keep you informed. In the meantime, it might help to keep things calm down here." "The last thing we need is a riot." Thrix didn't reply, but the tension in the room relaxed by a fraction. A small victory, but a victory nonetheless. Vesper and Arcana left the command center, feeling the weight of the station's collective paranoia pressing down on them like a particularly affectionate anvil. "We've got to find out who's behind this," Arcana said, his voice grim. "Before someone with a grudge and a lack of impulse control decides to take matters into their own hands." "Agreed," Vesper said, her eyes scanning the corridors for any sign of trouble. "But where do we start? It's not like the station has a directory for evil underground labs." "Maybe not," Arcana replied, "but every secret has a trail. We just need to find the breadcrumbs." They headed towards the lower decks, where the station's less savory elements tended to congregate. If there were whispers of who was behind the cloning operation, they'd likely find them here, amidst the smoke of questionable substances and the hum of illicit deals. As they navigated the dimly lit corridors, Vesper couldn't help but chuckle darkly. You know, I never thought I'd miss the days when our biggest problem was a broken air recycler. Careful what you wish for, Arcana replied, his eyes scanning the shadows for threats both real and imagined. In this universe, dreams have a nasty habit of becoming nightmares. They approached a dingy bar, the kind of place where dreams went to die and then were promptly resurrected as bad decisions. The patrons, a motley collection of species that made the Star Trek cantina look like a choir rehearsal, barely glanced up as Vesper and Arcana entered. The bartender, a surly humanoid with more tattoos than sense, glanced at them with a mixture of curiosity and disdain. "What'll it be?" he grunted, cleaning a glass with a rag that looked like it had seen better centuries. "Information," Vesper said, leaning on the bar with the casual confidence of someone who knew they were one wrong word away from a brawl. "About the cloning pods," the bartender snorted. "You and everyone else, sister. Word is it's the humans' doing." "Yeah, well, word is wrong," Vesper shot back. "We want to know who's really behind it." The bartender shrugged, unimpressed by their bravado. "Information like that doesn't come cheap. We're not buying," Arcana said smoothly. "We're just here to listen." The bartender eyed them, calculating the risk versus the reward. Finally, he sighed and leaned forward. "There's a guy, calls himself the broker. Rumor has it he deals in tech, rare, exotic, and usually illegal." "Sounds like our kind of guy," Vesper said. "Where can we find him?" The bartender pointed to a door at the back of the bar, half hidden by shadows and questionable intent. "Down there. But I warn you, the broker doesn't like uninvited guests." "Good thing we got an invitation," Vesper quipped, though the invitation was more of the intruder alert variety. They made their way to the door, Vesper's heart pounding with the thrill of the chase. She loved this feeling, the anticipation of the unknown, the sense of stepping into a story where they were the heroes, or at least the protagonists with questionable morals. The room beyond was dimly lit, filled with the hum of machinery and the faint smell of something that probably violated several health codes. In the center of the room stood the broker, a tall figure with an air of mystery and a wardrobe that screamed, "I've seen too many old spy movies." "Ah, visitors," the broker said, his voice smooth and oily, like a sales pitch wrapped in velvet. "What can I do for you?" "We're looking for information on the cloning pods," Vesper said, not bothering with pleasantries. "And we hear you're the man to talk to." The broker chuckled, a sound that would have been pleasant if it weren't so utterly devoid of warmth. "Information, my dear, is the currency of the galaxy, and I'm its treasurer." "Great," Vesper replied, unfazed. "Consider this a withdrawal." The broker's eyes gleamed with amusement. "Bold, I like that. But information like this doesn't come free, you understand." "What do you want?" Arcana asked, his voice as steady as a rock in a hurricane. The broker paused, considering. "A favor. I have a package that needs delivering. Do this for me and I'll tell you what you want to know." Vesper exchanged a glance with Arcana. It was a gamble, but then again, when wasn't it? "Fine," she said. "We'll deliver your package. But you better hold up your end of the bargain." The broker's smile was all teeth and no sincerity. "I'm a man of my word," he said, the lie so smooth it could have been a politician's campaign promise. They left the broker's den with a package that was suspiciously light and a promise that was equally so. As they made their way back to the bar, Vesper couldn't help but think that they were in way over their heads. "Remind me why we're doing this again," Arcana asked, his tone half serious, half joking. "Because," Vesper replied with a grin, "there's nothing more thrilling than court jester chaos. And because," Arcana added with a sigh, "we're hopelessly curious and potentially suicidal." "Exactly," Vesper said, feeling the weight of their discovery pressing on her once more. "But mostly because we need answers. And if that means playing errand boys for a shady dealer, so be it." The station seemed to hum with an undercurrent of anticipation, the kind that could erupt into pandemonium at any moment. As they made their way through the throng of aliens, Vesper felt a flicker of something she hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. Not the naive kind, but the sort rooted in action and stubborn determination. The kind that burns bright even in the deepest darkness. With each step the stakes rose and the lines blurred, but Vesper remained resolute. She'd unravel this mystery, whatever it took, because she was Vesper, and in the end, she was damn good at it, even if it killed her. The lower decks of the Wormhole station resembled a malfunctioning disco ball, all dim lights and bizarre noises. Vesper and Arcana navigated through the labyrinthine corridors, both eager and apprehensive about what they'd signed up for. A clandestine delivery job. Just another day in the intergalactic neighborhood. Funny how we're supposed to be the heroes of this debacle, Vesper murmured, sidestepping an ooze-dripping pipe that looked about as reliable as a politician's promise. And yet here we are playing courier for a man who looks like he moonlights as a trench coat model. Arcana shrugged, his usual calm tinged with a dash of dry humor. Better than the time we cleaned out a hydroponics tank for dinner credits. Remember the smell? Vesper made a face. How could I forget? It was like a rotting salad had learned to play jazz. Their banter was interrupted by the metallic screech of an intercom. Attention all personnel. Unauthorized activity detected in Sector 9C. All security units, report immediately. Vesper and Arcana exchanged a look, a silent communication honed from years of shared misadventures. "Think that's us?" Arcana asked, his tone as innocent as a cat caught in a canary's nest. "If it's not, I'll eat my boots," Vesper replied, picking up the pace. "And you know how much I love these boots." They reached the corridor that led to the cloning lab, its door sealed with a makeshift sign that read, "Authorized personnel only." As if a flimsy piece of cardboard had ever stopped anyone with a little curiosity and a lot of bad ideas. "Looks like we're about to meet our doppelgangers," Vesper said, punching in a code with all the finesse of a frustrated cook trying to open a ketchup bottle. "Hope they're less annoying than the real us." The door slid open with a groan of protest, revealing a room that screamed mad scientist chic. Cloning pods lined the walls, humming ominously like a choir of angry bees. Each pod housed a version of Vesper or Arcana, all blissfully unaware of the chaos surrounding them. "Well, this is awkward," Arcana quipped, examining a pod with a half-smirk. "Do you think they dream of electric sheep or just bad life decisions?" "Depends on how much they've inherited from us," Vesper replied, searching for a control panel. "Let's just hope they don't have our knack for trouble." They located the main terminal, a cobbled-together monstrosity of wires and screens. Vesper's fingers danced over the keys, attempting to shut down the operation without accidentally launching a pod full of clones into the vacuum of space. "Any luck?" Arcana asked, keeping a wary eye on the door. "Define luck," Vesper muttered. "I can either deactivate the pods or set off an alarm that'll bring every alien security officer running. Guess which one's more likely?" "Knowing our luck, the alarm," Arcana said with a resigned sigh. "Go ahead. I'd hate to break tradition." Vesper hit a button, and for a moment nothing happened. Then, as though the universe couldn't resist the punchline, klaxons blared to life, bathing the room in a harsh red glow. "Well, that's not ominous at all," Arcana remarked as the intercom crackled to life again, this time with a more urgent message. "Attention! Security breach in Sector 9C. All units respond immediately." "Time to go," Vesper said, grabbing Arcana's arm and pulling him towards the exit. "I hear space jail isn't nearly as nice as it sounds." They bolted from the lab, the sound of distant footsteps echoing behind them. Vesper's heart raced, a mix of adrenaline and sheer disbelief at their perpetual knack for disaster. "Think we'll make it?" Arcana asked, his voice tinged with the kind of hope only a desperate man could muster. "We've got to," Vesper replied, skidding around a corner. "Because if we don't, I'm blaming you for the mess." They barreled through the corridors, weaving past bewildered aliens and disgruntled station staff. As they neared the exit, a familiar shriek stopped them in their tracks. It was Grundle, the ever-skeptical alien who had made a hobby out of doubting human competence. His eyes, or what Vesper assumed were eyes, narrowed suspiciously. "Running away, are we?" Grundle said, his tone as oily as a used car salesman's handshake. "Typical humans causing chaos and then fleeing the scene." "Grundle, you know us," Arcana said, flashing a smile that was equal parts charm and desperation. "If we were behind this, we'd be riding the wave of chaos, not running from it." Grundle snorted, a sound that could have been a laugh or a sneeze. "And yet here you are, looking guilty as a Terran cat caught in the yarn stash." "Okay, fine, maybe we're a little guilty," Vesper admitted, edging around Grundle. "But we're trying to fix it, so if you could just pretend you didn't see us, that'd be great." Grundle considered this, his expression suggesting he was weighing the amusement value against the moral high ground. Finally, he stepped aside with a grudging nod. "You humans are nothing if not entertaining. Go on before I change my mind." They sprinted past him, grateful for the small mercy. Behind them, the station buzzed with activity, a beehive of speculation and fear. "Think he'll keep his word?" Arcana asked, glancing over his shoulder. "Do we ever?" Vesper replied, skidding to a halt as they reached the docking bay. Their ship loomed ahead, a battered beauty that had seen better days but still had enough fight left for one more escape. As they climbed aboard, Vesper felt the weight of their failure pressing down on her. They hadn't stopped the cloning operation. If anything, they just confirmed the worst suspicions about human meddling. But there was no time for regrets. "Get us out of here," she instructed Arcana, sliding into the co-pilot seat. "I'm in no mood to chat with the local constabulary." With a deftness that belied his usual laid-back demeanor, Arcana guided the ship out of the bay and into the vastness of space. Behind them, the Wormhole station shrank into the distance, a glowing reminder of everything they'd left unresolved. "So what now?" Arcana asked, his voice cutting through the hum of the ship's engines. "Now," Vesper said, allowing herself a grim smile. "Now we regroup, figure out what the hell went wrong, and come up with a plan that doesn't involve setting off every alarm in the galaxy. And if we can't," Vesper leaned back in her seat, eyes fixed on the stars, "then we do what we do best. Make it up as we go along." They navigated through space, the silence between them comfortable and charged with unspoken resolve. Vesper knew they were far from out of the woods, or in this case, the asteroid field. But for now, the simple fact that they were still flying was enough. "Think the broker's gonna be mad we didn't deliver his package?" Arcana asked after a moment, breaking the silence. "Let's hope he's a patient kind of shady," Vesper replied, though neither of them believed it for a second. Their laughter mingled with the ship's rhythmic hum, a fragile sound in the vast expanse. They were running, yes, but they were running together, and as far as Vesper was concerned, that was all she needed. Because in the end, when the galaxy seemed determined to chew them up and spit them out, all they had were each other, and a knack for landing in the thick of things. But mostly they had hope. Hope that they'd find the truth. Hope that they'd fix their mess. And hope that in the end they'd prove everyone wrong about human meddling. Because if there was one thing Vesper knew, it was that humans were at their best when the odds were stacked sky-high against them. And no amount of alien suspicion or technological chaos could change that. As Vesper and Arcana sped away from the Wormhole station, they felt the familiar thrum of their ship's engines beneath them, a sensation as comforting as it was nerve-wracking. The last thing they needed was another catastrophic failure, but given their track record, they might as well have been hurtling toward the sun with a butter knife between their teeth. Just when Vesper thought things couldn't get worse, the ship's console lit up like a holiday parade, throwing a kaleidoscope of warning lights into the cockpit. "Oh, lovely. Blinking lights," Vesper muttered. Nothing says peace of mind quite like a dashboard having a nervous breakdown. Arcana leaned over to assess the situation, his fingers dancing over the controls with the precision of a man defusing a bomb, or at least trying to keep one from exploding in his face. Looks like the wormhole generator's acting up. Again. Why does that sound like a precursor to an epically bad day? Vesper asked, already knowing the answer. Arcana gave her a dry look. Because it is. The generator's giving off fluctuations. If it goes, the station could evaporate faster than a sneeze in a vacuum. Vesper stared at the display, a jumble of numbers and symbols that seemed to taunt her with their complexity. And let me guess, we're the only ones close enough to try and fix this mess. If you call being a trillion miles away close, then sure, Arcana replied, with the resigned air of a man who's had one too many brushes with death. But the station's on borrowed time, and given how much they love us, I'm sure they'll welcome our assistance with open claws. We're going back in, aren't we? Vesper sighed, already knowing they had no choice. It was either that or let a bunch of innocent, and not so innocent, aliens pay the price for their incompetence. Looks like it, Arcana said, setting a course back to the station. Though I doubt they'll roll out the red carpet. More like the red lasers, Vesper added. Let's just hope they remember who saved their skins when this is over. As they approached the station, the intercom crackled with the familiar voice of Dr. Arcana, the diplomat, not the pilot, trying to calm the rapidly growing crowd. All right, everyone, let's not panic. If we've survived Grundle's cooking, this is nothing. The attempt at humor fell flat, much like the diplomat's hair that always seemed to hover between disheveled and bird's nest. Vesper toggled the comms. Doctor, Arcana, it's us. We're coming in to help with the generator, unless you'd prefer to use it as an impromptu fireworks display. Dr. Arcana's voice replied, laced with a mix of surprise and skepticism. I suppose having you two back is better than the alternative. We're in dire need of a miracle, or at the very least, some adroit improvisation. Well, if anyone can improvise their way out of an interstellar disaster, it's us, Arcana quipped, guiding the ship toward the docking bay. They touched down with all the grace of a drunken dancer, the ship groaning in protest as its landing gears met the deck. Vesper and Arcana disembarked, immediately confronted by the frenetic chaos of the station's interior. Aliens of all shapes and questionable odors were bustling around, each more panicked than the last. Nice to see everyone's keeping calm, Vesper remarked, ducking to avoid an overly enthusiastic tentacle waving a data pad. Nothing like a little existential dread to bring folks together. They wound their way back through the labyrinthine corridors, retracing their steps toward the generator room. The farther they went, the more apparent it became that their earlier escapades had left an indelible impression, or at least a few lingering stares and whispered suspicions. Feel the love, Arcana? Vesper asked, nodding to a group of Phallaxians huddled together, muttering about human cloning. I'd almost think they're planning a welcome party. If by party you mean angry mob, then yes, Arcana said, quickening his pace. But let's focus on not blowing up the station first, shall we? They reached the generator room, where the air was thick with tension and the smell of burned circuits. Inside, the wormhole generator loomed like a mechanical beast on the verge of a nervous breakdown, its lights flickering in an erratic, almost mocking pattern. All right, what are we dealing with? Vesper asked, approaching the control panel with the cautious optimism of someone about to disarm a bomb with a plastic fork. The fluctuations are getting worse, Arcana replied, pointing to a readout that looked like a child's attempt at drawing a roller coaster. We need to stabilize the core before it overloads and takes us all on a one-way trip to nowhere. Why does it always come down to a ticking time bomb and us with a pair of pliers? Vesper grumbled, her fingers flying over the controls as she worked her magic, or at least tried to. As they tinkered with the generator, Grundle appeared in the doorway, his expression a curious mix of skepticism and reluctant hope. You two again. Are you here to fix it or finish it off? Vesper didn't look up from the controls. We're here to fix it, Grundle. Unless you know a better way to stop this thing from turning the station into space dust, Grundle huffed, folding his arms with typical alien disdain. I suppose not. But don't expect me to believe this will end well. Your faith in us is truly inspiring, Arcana said with a sarcastic salute. Maybe next time try rooting for us. You might be surprised. The generator emitted a disconcerting whine, a sound that could only be described as the mechanical equivalent of a nervous breakdown. Vesper winced, adjusting the settings with the deftness of a seasoned gambler hedging her bets. All right, I've rerouted power from the secondary systems, she said. We should have just enough juice to stabilize the core, assuming, of course, that the station doesn't decide to up and die on us. And if it does, Grundle asked, his tone dripping with skepticism. Then you might want to start praying to whatever gods you believe in, Arcana said. Because we'll be well beyond divine intervention territory. The generator's hum shifted, a low growl turning into something more stable, like a cat settling into a reluctant purr. Vesper held her breath, willing the machine to comply with her makeshift repairs. Come on, you stubborn piece of metal, she whispered, coaxing the controls like a mother soothing a cranky child. Just hold together long enough for us to get out of here. For a moment, it seemed like the universe was content to let them succeed. The generator's fluctuations steadied, the lights returning to their usual glow. Vesper and Arcana exchanged a look, their relief palpable. Did we actually do it? Arcana asked, as if afraid to believe their luck. Looks like it, Vesper replied, trying not to sound too surprised. Now let's get the hell out of here before something else goes wrong. As they turned to leave, Grundle stepped aside, his expression begrudgingly respectful. Perhaps you humans aren't as incompetent as I thought. High praise coming from you, Vesper said with a grin, feeling a rare sense of accomplishment. Maybe next time we'll shoot for not completely hopeless. They made their way back to the docking bay, the station's inhabitants gradually calming as news of the successful repair spread. Even Dr. Arcana seemed impressed, his diplomatic poise restored as he addressed the gathered crowd. Well, folks, it seems our human friends have saved the day, he announced, with just enough humor to soften the tension. Let's hope they stick around long enough to fix the next crisis. After all, they do seem to have a knack for them. Vesper and Arcana boarded their ship, ready to put the chaotic events of the day behind them. As they settled into their seats, Vesper couldn't help but chuckle. Think we'll ever get a break from saving the universe? She asked, half serious, half joking. Arcana shrugged, a smile playing on his lips. Probably not. But then again, would we really have it any other way? Guess not, Vesper admitted, watching as the stars streaked by. Here's to hoping our next adventure is just as explosive, figuratively speaking. With that, they set course for the next destination, knowing full well that wherever they ended up, trouble was sure to find them. But for now, they were content to revel in the small victory, buoyed by the knowledge that even in the darkest corners of the galaxy, humans could still shine, albeit with a bit of jury-rigging and a lot of luck. As the cosmos stretched out before them, Vesper allowed herself a moment of hope. Sure, they'd been through hell and back, and the universe was a mess of uncertainties and dangers. But as long as they had each other, and their unique brand of mischief, they could face whatever else the galaxy decided to throw their way. Because if there was one thing they'd learned, it was that sometimes the best way to navigate the chaos of space was to just keep flying, and hope you didn't crash into anything too large or too angry along the way. And with that, they journeyed onward, ready for whatever lay ahead. After all, it wasn't the destination that mattered, but the stories they'd collect along the way. The air in the Wormhole station was thick with stress, uncertainty, and the faint aroma of Grundle's lunch, which was an insult to both cuisine and olfactory senses. Vesper and Dr. Arcana, having barely stabilized the station's generator, were now thrust into another delightful crisis, the kind best accompanied by a stiff drink and a strong inclination to run. Who knew fixing one disaster would be the warm-up for another, Vesper quipped, eyeing the swarm of frantic humans and aliens surging like a panic-stricken tide. Feels like we're auditioning for a galactic reality show, Dr. Arcana, the diplomatic one, or at least the one who wore the suit better, tried to mask his weariness with a sardonic grin. I always thought our lives had the makings of a tragicomedy. Though, I admit, the tragedy's been hogging the spotlight lately. They were on their way to the command deck, a place where decisions were purportedly made, though lately it seemed more like a stage for increasingly creative swearing. Commander Thrix, the station's nominal leader, a role akin to herding cats with a laser pointer, had called an emergency meeting. Rumor had it he was contemplating an evacuation. Nothing stirs the crowd like the whiff of impending doom. Evacuation, Vesper muttered as they navigated through a corridor that smelled like despair and burnt toast. What's next? A self-help group for those traumatized by station life. Could be the shock therapy we all need, Doctor, Arcana replied, sidestepping a pair of arguing Phallaxians. Though I suspect it'll take more than therapy to fix this mess. The command deck was a circus of chaos, where shouting was the native tongue and panic was the uninvited guest that had overstayed its welcome. Commander Thrix stood at the center, a mountain of stress stuffed into a uniform that might once have fit. His eyes were the kind that belonged to someone who'd seen too many things go wrong at exactly the wrong time. Ah, Vesper, Doctor, Arcana, Thrix greeted them with the enthusiasm of a man facing a firing squad. Welcome to the end of the world. Again, thrilled to be here, Vesper replied, her sarcasm so thick you could spread it on toast. What's the disaster du jour? Thrix rubbed his temples, the universal sign for I'm surrounded by idiots. We've got humans talking to some of the alien factions, considering jumping ship. Seems some of them got tired of playing space heroes and fancy a change of scenery. And by change of scenery, I assume you mean a one-way ticket to Betrayalville, Vesper asked, arching an eyebrow. Bingo, Thrix said. And if they bail, it's gonna get real ugly, real fast. We need every pair of hands to keep this station from turning into a cosmic dust bunny, Doctor. Arcana leaned against a console, surveying the room where fear was as palpable as the recycled air. I take it diplomacy isn't an option, Thrix snorted. Diplomacy? We're past tea and crumpets, my friend. This is more like a bar brawl with everyone blindfolded. As if on cue the intercom flared to life, broadcasting a message from one of the station's many disgruntled factions. Attention, esteemed residents of our fine, dilapidated station. This is Gordak of the Glorex Syndicate. We are offering sanctuary to any humans willing to join our ranks. You've seen how well your leaders manage crises. How about trying your luck with us? The message cut off, leaving a silence thicker than Grundle's stew. Well, that's not ominous at all, Vesper said, folding her arms. What's their recruitment slogan? Join us and maybe you won't die horribly, Doctor. Arcana chuckled, though there was little humor in it. Seems like an enticing offer in these parts, Thrix sighed, rubbing his eyes. We need to stop them before they get any stupid ideas. If morale drops any lower, we'll need a shovel to find it. All right, Vesper said, her voice firm. Let's find these would-be defectors and remind them why sticking together is in their best interest. Thrix nodded, grateful for a sliver of hope. I'll keep things from imploding here. You too, find those potential turncoats and play nice. Define nice, Vesper called over her shoulder as she and Dr. Arcana headed out. I'm running low on sugar-coated pep talks. Just try not to scare them into a coma, Thrix replied, with a resigned wave. The halls of the Wormhole station were a tapestry of desperation and haste, where every face told a story of survival and regret. The intercom crackled sporadically, spitting out updates and warnings like a malfunctioning oracle. Unauthorized activity detected in Sector 9C, it blared, the voice as cheerful as a eulogy. Please refrain from panicking. Station security is on high alert. Vesper and Dr. Arcana moved with purpose, their destination a secluded part of the station rumored to harbor discontented humans. The place was an architectural afterthought, hidden behind a maze of corridors that twisted like a politician's promise. Do you think they're really considering jumping ship? Dr. Arcana asked, his voice low. Desperation does funny things to people, Vesper replied, her eyes scanning for anything out of place. Sometimes it's easier to believe in a new lie than face an old truth. They reached the entrance to a small, dimly lit room that smelled of burnt electronics and old hopes. Inside, a group of humans huddled together, their expressions a mix of suspicion and guilt, the kind you see in kids caught sneaking out after curfew. Evening, folks, Vesper said, leaning against the doorframe. Mind if we join your little powwow? A tall, lanky man with eyes like an overworked accountant stepped forward, his gaze flicking between Vesper and Dr. Arcana. Who's asking? Just a couple of friendly neighborhood disaster managers, Vesper replied, crossing her arms. We heard some of you might be thinking about taking up Gordak's charming offer. The man who introduced himself as Bryce shrugged. Can you blame us? This station's a death trap. We're tired of playing cannon fodder in someone else's war, Doctor. Arcana stepped forward, his voice calm but firm. Trust me, I understand. But running off with the Glorak Syndicate, they're more likely to sell you for parts than offer protection. A woman in the back snorted. And what are our options here? Wait for the next malfunction to turn us into stardust. Vesper nodded, acknowledging their frustration. I get it, I do. But we've got a better chance sticking together than scattering like spooked roaches. You've seen what happens when we work as a team, we save lives. Bryce folded his arms, his skepticism almost tangible. And if we stay, what's stopping us from getting blown up tomorrow, Doctor? Arcana chuckled darkly. The same thing stopping us from getting blown up today. You stick with us and we'll keep fighting to make sure tomorrow isn't our last. Silence hung heavy in the room, the kind that comes right before a decision, a tipping point where hope and despair hang in the balance. Finally, Bryce sighed, his shoulders sagging. All right, you've made your point. We're not ready to trust the syndicate just yet. Smart choice, Vesper said, relief tempered with caution. Now, let's get back to the command deck before someone decides to rewrite the disaster playbook. With the reluctant would-be defectors in tow, Vesper and Doctor Arcana made their way back through the station's labyrinthine corridors, where shadows danced with secrets and the walls whispered tales of past glories and current struggles. As they approached the command deck, the intercom crackled once more, delivering a new update with the enthusiasm of a funeral director. Attention all personnel. Commander Thrix has ordered an evacuation drill. Please proceed to designated areas. Evacuation drill. Vesper muttered, exchanging a glance with Dr. Arcana. Does he know something we don't? Either that, or he's adding Master of Chaos to his resume, Dr. Arcana replied, picking up the pace. Back at the command deck, Commander Thrix was orchestrating what felt more like a controlled panic than an orderly drill. His face bore the weary determination of someone who'd seen too many plans go awry. Any luck? Thrix asked as Vesper and Dr. Arcana entered, his tone a mix of hope and resignation. Managed to talk some sense into them, Vesper replied, jerking a thumb at Bryce and the others. No one's jumping ship today. Thrix nodded, visibly relieved. Good. We need every hand on deck if we're gonna get through this, Doctor. Arcana surveyed the organized chaos, his expression contemplative. So, what's the real story behind this drill? Thrix sighed, a long, deep breath that spoke volumes. It's not just a drill. Sensors picked up some unusual activity near the station. Could be nothing, but we can't take any chances. Vesper rubbed her temples, feeling the weight of the universe pressing down. Nothing like the threat of imminent death to motivate people. Motivation or madness, take your pick, Thrix replied, a wry smile playing on his lips. The tension in the room was palpable, a silent testament to the stakes at hand. Every face was etched with determination, fear, and a quiet resolve that spoke of survival against the odds. So, what's the plan? Bryce asked, stepping forward with a newfound sense of purpose. Thrix looked around, meeting each gaze with a steely determination. We hold the line. We keep this station running and show the universe what we're made of. We stick together, No matter what, Vesper nodded, feeling a spark of hope flare in her chest. Let's show them what humans can do when we're backed into a corner. With the station united under a shared purpose, they prepared to face whatever challenge lay ahead. Because in the vast, uncaring cosmos, sometimes the only thing standing between survival and oblivion was the stubborn, relentless spirit of humanity. And for now, that would have to be enough. Vesper paced the cramped confines of the command deck, her mind racing faster than a hyperdrive on caffeine. They had to stabilize the wormhole generator, or the station would cease to exist in a spectacular display of cosmic fireworks. And while fireworks might be great for a party, they were generally frowned upon in space stations. "All right, folks," she announced, clapping her hands together with the enthusiasm of a motivational speaker at a funeral. "We need to fix the generator before we all get an unplanned vacation in the void." "Who's with me?" The room was silent, save for the faint hum of machinery doing its best impression of a lullaby from hell. Faces stared back at her with expressions ranging from incredibly skeptical to "I already wrote my will." "Peachy," Vesper muttered under her breath. "Looks like I'm running a dance club for pessimists." Dr. Arcana stepped up, always the diplomat, even in the face of impending doom. "I suppose it's up to us to lead by example, Vesper. Nothing like a little hands-on experience to get the adrenaline pumping." Vesper glanced over to Thrix, who was juggling a tablet and a dozen problems. "You got a plan, Thrix, or are we just winging it as usual?" Thrix gave a resigned shrug, the kind that said, "I've given up on optimism. Get to the engineering deck, see if you can stabilize the damn thing. I'll keep the rest of this circus from eating each other." "Great," Vesper replied, heading for the exit, Dr. Arcana in tow. "We'll just perform a miracle then." The corridors were a chaotic mess, a testament to humanity's ability to freak out in the most uncoordinated way possible. People were running in every direction, some dragging belongings, others dragging reluctant friends. It was like a fire drill on steroids. "Ever notice," Vesper said to Arcana as they dodged a panicked engineer carrying what looked like an oversized toaster, "how evacuations always look like someone yelled fire in a crowded theater?" Dr. Arcana smirked. "I prefer to think of it as a spontaneous dance party. Only, with more existential dread." They reached the engineering deck, where the wormhole generator loomed like a sleeping dragon with indigestion. Its usual hum had transformed into a worrying groan, the kind that said, "Touch me, and I'll make you regret it." "All right, let's see what we're dealing with," Vesper said, approaching the control console with the caution of someone defusing a bomb made of angry cats. Dr. Arcana was already scanning the readouts, his brow furrowing. "Looks like there's a fluctuation in the energy matrix. If we can stabilize the output, we might just stop this thing from going kaboom." "Might?" Vesper echoed, her tone dripping with sarcasm. "That's comforting, right up there with the checks in the mail." "Optimism, Vesper," Arcana replied, setting to work with a series of swift keystrokes. What could possibly go wrong? As they delved deeper into the intricacies of the generator's systems, Arcana's face lit up with a revelation that was half eureka, half "oh crap." "Hold on," he muttered, peering closer at the data streaming across the screen. "There's something embedded in the cloning technology. A message, encrypted." Vesper raised an eyebrow, intrigued despite herself. "What kind of message? And more importantly, why the hell is it hiding in our tech?" Arcana worked on decrypting it, his fingers dancing over the controls like a pianist on speed. It's a directive from high command. They were using the cloning pods to, well, let's just say it's not something they'd want in the company newsletter." "Color me shocked," Vesper said dryly. "What are they hiding now, the clones?" "They're not just backups," Arcana continued, his voice tinged with disbelief. "They're designed to observe, to monitor us. It's like having a spy in your own skin." Vesper let out a low whistle. "Big Brother's watching, and he's really committed to staying under the radar." Arcana nodded. "No wonder the generator's on the fritz. It's tied into their surveillance network." "Sabotage by incompetence." "Fantastic," Vesper said with a grim smile. As if we didn't have enough to worry about. They exchanged a glance, a silent acknowledgement that their mission had just taken a sharp turn into the realm of the ridiculous. Fix the generator, stop the surveillance, and keep the station intact. Easy, right? All right, Vesper said, cracking her knuckles. Let's kill two birds with one stone. Or in this case, fix a generator and disable a secret surveillance plot. All in a day's work, Doctor. Arcana chuckled, the sound lacking any real humor. Piece of cake. Assuming the cake is made of highly unstable explosives. With renewed determination, they set to work. Arcana focused on decrypting and shutting down the clandestine surveillance, while Vesper tackled the energy fluctuations with the focus of a gambler betting their last chip. Just think of it as a puzzle, Arcana suggested, his tone light despite the gravity of their situation. Only this one explodes if you get it wrong. Gee, thanks, Vesper shot back, her hands deftly adjusting controls and rerouting power like a maestro conducting an orchestra of chaos. Minutes stretched into what felt like hours, the tension in the air as thick as the station's coffee. But slowly, surely, progress was made. The generator's groaning subsided, replaced by a steadier, more reassuring hum. We did it, Arcana breathed, more surprised than triumphant. I think we actually did it. Vesper leaned back, wiping sweat from her brow. Well, what do you know? Turns out we're not half bad at playing hero. With the generator stabilized and the surveillance disabled, they made their way back through the station, the corridors now a little less chaotic, a little more hopeful. Think we saved the day? Vesper asked, her voice laced with the usual mix of cynicism and humor. Arcana shrugged. For today, maybe. Tomorrow's another story. When they returned to the command deck, Thrix greeted them with an expression caught between relief and disbelief. I take it you two actually pulled it off. We'd love to say it was easy, Vesper replied, but that would be a lie more egregious than station coffee. Thrix nodded, a rare smile tugging at his lips. Well, color me impressed. Don't get used to it, Vesper quipped. We're still amateurs at this whole saving the world gig. But beneath the banter, there was a shared understanding. They'd faced the abyss and managed to pull back from the brink. For now, at least, they'd live to fight another day. Hey, Arcana said, his tone shifting from playful to serious, about that message we found. It changes things. We need to figure out who we can trust. Thrix's expression hardened, the shadows under his eyes deepening. That's a conversation for another time. Right now, let's keep this bucket of bolts from falling apart. As plans were made and tasks delegated, Vesper and Arcana found themselves once again standing side by side, surveying the chaotic beauty of humans in survival mode. It's not pretty, Vesper said, watching the flurry of activity with something approaching pride. But it's ours, Arcana nodded. And for now, that's enough. With the immediate crisis averted, they returned to the task of living on the edge of oblivion. Because if there was one thing humans excelled at, it was surviving by the skin of their teeth. And as long as the station stood, so would they. Ready to meet whatever the universe threw at them next with humor, grit, and just a touch of defiance. They were, after all, only human. The station's corridors were quieter now, the chaos subsiding into something resembling organized disorder. Vesper and Dr. Arcana marched through the dimly lit passageways like a pair of underpaid tour guides leading a doomed expedition. They had a new mission now. Talk sense into the aliens before someone decided that opening fire was a good solution to miscommunication. Remind me why we're the ones who have to play diplomat, Vesper grumbled, her voice bouncing off the metal walls. Because we're the only ones stupid enough to volunteer, replied Arcana, his lips twitching into a semblance of a smile. Besides, who better to explain human technology than the ones who just poked it with a stick until it worked? Right, Vesper said, because the universe clearly rewards that kind of ingenuity. They approached the docking bay where Commander Thrix was trying to placate a group of aliens who looked like they'd rather be anywhere else. Phylaxian and Grundle stood among them, radiating skepticism like it was their primary form of communication. Nice of you to join us, Thrix said, his expression suggesting he'd rather be wrestling a black hole. I trust you've got a magic trick up your sleeve. Vesper glanced at Arcana, who nodded as if he had a plan that didn't involve desperate improvisation. Something like that, she replied. We're going to show them what we found. Phylaxian's many limbs twitched as if itching to start a rumor about human incompetence. And why should we believe anything you show us, hum? You could simply be playing another one of your clever tricks. Oh, trust me, Arcana interjected. If we were good at tricks, we wouldn't be in this mess, but we do have something to share. Vesper suppressed a grin. Yeah, we found a little surprise in our own tech. Turns out, someone high up decided to use the cloning pods for a bit of unauthorized espionage. Spying on yourselves, Grundle scoffed, his tone dripping with sarcasm. Classic human move. Right, Vesper replied, her tone matching his. But here's the kicker. We're gonna use that very tech to prove we're not out to get you. Phylaxian crossed two of his arms, an expression of dubious intrigue. And how do you propose to do that? Arcana gestured towards the cloning lab, a place of mad scientist chic and questionable ethical choices. We'll give you a tour. Let you see what we're working with. And why should we trust you? Phylaxian pressed, his many eyes narrowing suspiciously. Vesper shrugged. You've got a choice, believe us or wait around to see if the station blows up. Your call. The aliens exchanged glances, a silent conversation that ended in reluctant agreement. They followed Vesper and Arcana to the cloning lab, the air thick with unspoken questions and barely contained anxiety. The lab was a vision of sterile chaos, cloning pods lining the walls like bizarre decorations for a party no one wanted to attend. Vesper gestured with the flourish of someone unveiling a dubious art installation. This, she said, is the beauty of human innovation. It's how we plan to prove we're not out to clone an army of evil twins. Grundle tilted his head, unimpressed. And how exactly does this prove anything? Arcana took over, his voice steady. Because we're going to give you access to the surveillance network, show you what it's been recording. We've got nothing to hide. Phylaxian's skepticism wavered, curiosity peeking through the cracks. You'd allow us that kind of access? Absolutely, Vesper said. We'd love to show you the thrilling footage of us arguing over station maintenance and ration distribution. The aliens exchanged another look, this one tinged with reluctant interest. It was a gamble, one that relied on transparency and a little human charm. Arcana tapped a few keys, bringing up the surveillance feed on a nearby console. Grainy images flickered into life, revealing the mundane reality of life on the station. People working, arguing, and occasionally doing something almost productive. See, Vesper said, gesturing at the screen. Nothing sinister, just your average dysfunctional family. Phylaxian studied the footage, his expression inscrutable. Interesting, he murmured, his curiosity evidently piqued. The tension in the room eased, the atmosphere shifting from confrontational to cautiously optimistic. Vesper and Arcana exchanged a glance, a silent acknowledgement that they might just be pulling this off. So, Grundle said, breaking the silence, you're telling us these clones are for observation, nothing more. That's right, Arcana affirmed. We had no idea about the surveillance directive until today. But we're willing to work with you to ensure it's not used against anyone. Phylaxian nodded slowly, his skepticism giving way to something that might have been respect, or perhaps he was just tired of distrust. I'll admit, this is not the outcome I anticipated. Vesper allowed herself a small smile. We're full of surprises. Just ask anyone who's eaten my cooking. The group shared a rare moment of levity, the shared humor bridging the gap between suspicion and understanding. It was a small step, but in the vast expanse of space, small steps could lead to giant leaps. All right, Phylaxian said, his tone softening. We'll take you at your word. But know this, if we find any sign of deception, you'll be the first to hear about it, Vesper promised. We're all in this together. Besides, who else is going to entertain us with tales of human ineptitude? As they wrapped up their negotiations, Vesper couldn't help but feel a spark of hope. It wasn't much, but it was a start. And in a universe where survival often hinged on the smallest of victories, a start was all she needed. With the aliens placated and mutual understanding on the horizon, Vesper and Arcana returned to the command deck, where Thrix awaited with the patience of a saint, or perhaps just a man who had run out of things to throw at the wall. "How'd it go?" Thrix asked, his gaze flicking between them. "Better than expected," Vesper replied. "They are on board cautiously." "Good," Thrix said, relief briefly lighting up his features. "Maybe now we can focus on keeping this place from falling apart." Arcana chuckled, the sound almost a laugh. "You mean there's more to do than just avert imminent disasters?" "Yeah," Vesper quipped, "like figuring out how to handle the next crisis without losing our minds." As they settled into the familiar rhythm of problem-solving and crisis management, Vesper couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the beginning. They'd won a small victory, sure, but there were always more battles to fight. But for now, they'd savor this moment of peace, this brief respite in a universe that seemed hell-bent on testing their resilience. Because if there was one thing humans excelled at, it was finding hope in the most unlikely places. And as Vesper looked out at the stars beyond, she knew they'd keep pushing forward. Because giving up wasn't an option, and because, frankly, they were just too stubborn to quit. "All right, team," she announced, her voice steady with determination. "Let's get back to work. After all, the universe isn't going to save itself." With that, they dived headfirst into the chaos once more, driven by hope, humor, and the sheer force of will that had kept them going this far. And if nothing else, they'd make damn sure that when the universe threw its next curveball, they'd be ready to knock it out of the park. Because that's what humans did best. The Wormhole station might not have been a 5-star resort, but at least it wasn't actively trying to kill anyone anymore. The generator was as stable as a drunk on their third cup of coffee, and the corridors felt less like a scene from a disaster movie. Not that anyone was celebrating just yet. In space, peace was about as reliable as a politician's promise. Vesper and Dr. Arcana found themselves in the command deck, where the aroma of burnt circuits mixed with the delightful scent of desperation. Commander Thrix was hunched over a console, poking at it like it was a misbehaving child. "Well, look at you two," Thrix said without looking up. "Back from your little alien therapy session. Did they cry on your shoulder about the horrors of human incompetence?" "More like they laughed," Vesper replied, leaning against a wall that seemed to be doing its best impression of a decrepit cheese grater. "Turns out, we're not the only ones who think humans are a cosmic joke." Arcana snorted. "Yeah, but at least we're the ones who get to make the punchlines." Thrix finally deigned to give them his attention, rubbing his temples as if he could massage away the oncoming migraine. "So, does this mean we can stop worrying about them turning us into space dust?" "For now," Vesper said, "but I wouldn't go setting off any fireworks just yet." "Fireworks in a space station." Arcana tapped his chin thoughtfully. "Sounds like a fun way to make a permanent exit from existence." Thrix sighed, pointing at the wormhole generator status screen. "We've got a bigger problem or opportunity, depending on how optimistic you're feeling. The wormhole is officially stable. We can actually start using it for something other than a potential death sentence." Vesper crossed her arms, glancing at Arcana with a raised eyebrow. "And I suppose you want us to volunteer for first contact, too?" Arcana held up his hands in mock surrender. "Hell no. I prefer my limbs unchewed and my skin radiation-free, thank you very much." Thrix chuckled darkly. "Relax, I'm not suicidal. We've got teams putting together an exploration plan as we speak. Hopefully they'll find something other than a giant keep-out sign." "Well, nothing says welcome quite like a cosmic mystery," Vesper said, her tone dripping with sarcasm. "What's the worst that could happen? Besides everything?" Thrix's gaze turned serious, an expression that Vesper didn't see often unless the station was on the brink of imploding. "Jokes aside, this is a real chance for us. Humans and aliens working together. It's a big step." Arcana nodded, his usual joking demeanor replaced with a rare earnestness. Yeah, we might even manage not to screw it up. Imagine that. Vesper's mind drifted back to the cloning lab, those looming, eerie pods. They had been a symbol of everything wrong with humanity's penchant for self-sabotage. Now they represented a shot at redemption. She shook her head as if dismissing a fly. So how do we get started? Simple, Thrix replied, his lips curling into a sly smile. We do what humans do best. We improvise. It didn't take long for news of the wormhole stabilization to spread throughout the station. The initial reaction was a mix of disbelief and relief. After all, it was hard to trust something when Murphy's Law governed your life. But as the realization set in, there was a shift in the air, a tantalizing whiff of hope. Despite their cynicism, Vesper and Arcana had to admit that the prospect of exploration was exciting. Even if they were just cogs in the grand machine of space diplomacy, they were cogs with a front-row seat to history in the making. In the weeks that followed, the station buzzed with activity. Scientists, engineers, and diplomats alike scrambled to assemble equipment and draft protocols. Meetings were held, plans drawn up, and occasionally, someone even managed to sleep. Vesper found herself in one such meeting, surrounded by people who clearly took themselves far too seriously. She leaned over to Arcana, who was busy scribbling doodles of alien creatures on the back of his handout. "How's the art coming along?" she whispered, suppressing a grin. "Masterpiece in progress," Arcana replied, holding up his creation. "This one's called Grundle's Bad Hair Day. What do you think?" "I think it's a good thing art critique isn't a career path here," Vesper muttered, earning a stifled laugh from Arcana. As the meeting droned on about safety protocols and potential threats, Vesper's mind wandered back to the aliens. Despite the rocky start, she developed a grudging respect for them. Sure, they were skeptical, but it wasn't like humans had given them much reason to roll out the welcome mat. Phylaxian and Grundle had proved to be surprisingly reasonable once given the chance to understand human intentions, or lack thereof. Vesper wondered if they were as relieved as she was to find common ground. She was jolted back to reality by a question directed her way. "Vesper, any thoughts on the exploration crew candidates?" a voice asked, as monotone as the beige walls. "Yeah," she replied, casting a glance around the room. "Don't pick anyone with a death wish. We've got enough existential crises without adding volunteers for self-destruction." That earned a few chuckles, though Vesper suspected they were more polite than genuine. "Point taken," the speaker conceded, marking something on their tablet. Eventually, the meeting wrapped up, leaving Vesper and Arcana to their own devices. They wandered the station's corridors, the dim lighting casting long shadows that danced like phantoms along the walls. "You know," Arcana said, breaking the comfortable silence, "I never thought I'd see the day where working with aliens felt like the least of our worries." Vesper smirked. "Yeah, who'd have thought that existential dread would become so quaint? At least we can say we're living through history," Arcana mused. "No one ever tells you how much paperwork history involves, though. Or how much coffee," Vesper added, stifling a yawn. "I swear, the beans are the real MVP here." Their conversation was interrupted by an intercom announcement, the voice crackling through with all the warmth of a malfunctioning toaster oven. "Attention all personnel. Exploration team briefing in conference room C at 0600. Attendance mandatory, and don't be late or the captain might just use you as a space boy." Vesper shook her head, fighting a smile. "You've got to love their motivational techniques." "Oh, absolutely," Arcana replied, clasping his hands behind his head. "If nothing else, they've got a knack for creative threats." The next morning, Vesper and Arcana joined the throng of bleary-eyed individuals shuffling into conference room C. The atmosphere was electric with anticipation, the kind that made your palms sweat and your heart race. Or maybe that was just the caffeine kicking in. Commander Thrix stood at the front, his presence commanding enough to silence even the most persistent of side conversations. He cleared his throat, launching into his speech with the enthusiasm of a man who'd long given up on vacation days. "All right, people," he began, eyes scanning the crowd like a hawk sizing up potential prey. "We're about to take a big step into the great unknown. And we're going to do it with as much dignity as we can muster." "Dignity?" Vesper whispered to Arcana. "Someone should tell him we left that behind with the last supply run." Arcana snorted, earning a few shushed glances from nearby attendees. Thrix continued, oblivious, or perhaps indifferent, to the muttering among the ranks. "I know there's been a lot of skepticism, a lot of doubt. But I have faith that together, humans and aliens can create something worthwhile. So let's not screw it up, all right?" The room erupted into a mix of cheers and nervous laughter, an odd blend that suited the station's motley crew. Despite the challenges and the ever-present threat of cosmic calamity, Vesper couldn't help but feel a flutter of excitement. As the briefing concluded, Vesper and Arcana found themselves swept up in the current of bodies, everyone chattering animatedly about the possibilities ahead. She caught Arcana's eye and they shared a knowing smile. "Ready for this?" Arcana asked, his tone light but his eyes serious. Vesper shrugged, a gesture that somehow managed to convey both confidence and self-deprecation. "As ready as we'll ever be. It's not like we haven't faced worse." "True," Arcana agreed, his grin widening. "And hey, if we do mess up, at least we'll make some impressive fireworks." Vesper chuckled, feeling a warmth that had nothing to do with the station's iffy heating system. "Let's aim for a little less fire and a bit more works, yeah." With that, they joined the flow of personnel making their way to the docking bay, where the exploration vessels awaited. The air was thick with anticipation, the kind that made your stomach flip-flop and your pulse quicken. Phylaxian and Grundle were already there, overseeing the preparations with an air of professionalism that made Vesper feel like a kid caught raiding the cookie jar. Their presence was a reminder that this wasn't just a human venture, it was a shared journey into the unknown. Vesper approached them, offering a nod of acknowledgement. "Ready to see what's on the other side?" Grundle's mouth twitched into something that might have been a smile. "Ready as we'll ever be. Just remember, no reckless heroics, all right?" "Who, us?" "Never," Arcana interjected, his voice dripping with mock innocence. "We're the poster children for caution." Phylaxian's eyes glimmered with amusement. "Then I shall look forward to recounting your exploits in the exact opposite terms." As final preparations were made and the vessels readied for departure, Vesper took a moment to pause and reflect on the improbable journey that had brought them here. From a fragmented alliance of suspicion to a united front of cautious optimism, they had come a long way. It wasn't perfect, hell, it wasn't even close, but it was a start. And sometimes, in a universe as vast and indifferent as this one, a start was enough. With a deep breath and a final nod to her fellow explorers, Vesper boarded her designated vessel. The engines hummed to life, the vibrations thrumming through the hull like a heartbeat. As the wormhole loomed before them, a swirling maelstrom of uncertainty and possibility, Vesper couldn't help but feel a flicker of hope. Maybe, just maybe, they'd find something worth the risk, something that made all the chaos and confusion worthwhile. And if they didn't, well, there was always more coffee. With a wry smile, Vesper settled into her seat, ready to face whatever lay beyond the veil, because if there was one thing she'd learned, it was that humanity was nothing if not persistent. And as the vessel surged forward into the unknown, she knew that whatever happened next, they'd face it with humor, grit, and a stubborn refusal to quit. After all, they were only human.